Good morning, world. This is Nick Sorrentino for AgainstCornyCapitalism.org. So today I'd like to talk about the Shenandoah National Forest. I live in the foothills of Virginia Piedmont, um, and I love the Shenandoah National Forest. I go there all the time. Take my kids up there. We hike, you know, uh, regularly. In fact, I was up there a few days ago. Um, and we're celebrating the 75th anniversary of the opening of the park, which is to be celebrated, I suppose. I mean, like I said, I, my I've spent many happy hours there, with my family. Um, but there's a part of the story of the Shenandoah National Park that a lot of people don't know about, and that is that when I bought my house right at the foot of the Blue Ridge, I'd look up on the mountainside where the park was, and there were no houses there, and I always kind of wondered, how is it that that was the case? Um, and being somebody who grew up on flat land in Virginia Beach, not being familiar with mountains, I just assumed that I don't know, either the ground was too poor or it was too steep to live on or whatever. But what I came to understand was that there were people that used to live up there, where the Shenandoah National Park is, where Skyline Drive is. In fact, there were about 450 families that lived in where the park is now, and they were forcibly evicted by the Civilian Conservation Corps and FDR and his guys, government agents essentially. Um, and these were people that were simple folks. That's definitely the right word, folk. And typically they were Scots Irish folks that at one time had lived in the Piedmont where the land was fairly good, but as the English pushed further in, they were forced onto the land that was not as good. And by the time FDR came around, these folks had been up on the mountain for generations and generations, and they made their way, made their living by very simple means, subsistence farming, um, barely subsistence sometimes, a little, maybe the odd cow, a few pigs, something like that. But they were very independent people. They didn't trust the outside all that much, and understandably so, because um, there was a tradition of people coming and pushing them off their land, going back to Scotland and Ireland. So when FDR and actually Hoover too, they decided that it would be really, a great thing to have a national park on par with what seen out west in the east and easily accessible to the big cities. Um, they didn't. Well, it occurred to them, but they didn't care that there were families that happened to live along the Blue Ridge where they wanted to build Skyline Drive and create the park. So basically, what they did is they underwent the government demonized these folks. In publications called them outlaws and inbred and all these sorts of things. And of course, what are these people going to do? I mean, they have no power. Most of them probably didn't even know what was going on because they didn't read, they didn't get the newspapers. And then people just showed up on their door and said, hey, we own your land now, even though you've been here for 3 or 4 generations. We own your land. We're building a park. Get out. And the government was nice enough to have reservations essentially for these people who've been evicted from their land. But needless to say, a lot of these folks who it didn't really venture outside all that much to begin with. I mean, they didn't ask anything of their government. They barely asked for the services of a sheriff, even when things were, if something really went bad. They didn't take too kindly to these guys in suits showing up at their door and telling them to get off of, their land. So a lot of times, these folks refused to go, even when checks were handed to them. They refused to go, and in some cases, uh, government agents went in to these houses, pulled people out of their houses, and then burned the houses to the ground to make sure that the people would have to leave. This is our government doing this to property owners on their own land. They burned it to the ground so that the park could be made. And I was actually talking to a friend of mine recently who lives in the general vicinity, and he told me that one story he had heard was the government agents, the CCC and other folks, were under orders not to allow people to take their dogs out of the residents of the Blue Ridge, not to let the residents take their dogs because dogs were used as a means of defense and so on. And so what they would do, what a lot of times happened, is they locked the dogs in the houses when they set them on fire. And you can imagine how traumatic this whole scene must have been for the people who lived on the mountain. So, as we appreciate the beautiful vistas that Skyline Drive offers us, and as we hike the ridge lines and look at the trees and the flowers, and I do, it's important to remember that there were families for whom the 75th anniversary of the opening of the park is not cause for celebration. For AgainstCronyCapitalism.org, I'm Nick Sorrentino.